Welcome to the Virtual Strategic Solutions Virtual Reality Simulation System. Accessing Legacy Dataset. Files loaded, simulation ready. Fort Defiance was built in the 1800s to provide treatment for the region's mentally ill. Despite careful planning, the building, originally designed for 300 patients, had occupant numbers upwards of 3,000 by 2061. The resulting horrible conditions in the hospital were amplified by neglect on part of the personnel and caused undue suffering for the patients. Conditions within the asylum were abysmal for patients, though staff also suffered. Relations between staff and patients were poor, with staff referring to the patients by number rather than name. In one incident, a junior nurse suffered a nervous breakdown from exhaustion and was removed from his position to recuperate. In another incident, a patient bit a nurse, tearing her hand open, and attempted to flee. The truth of the conditions at the asylum was revealed in a 2061 exposé by Eleanor Tarquin of the Charleston Herald, who volunteered to go undercover and learn the truth, following the trail blazed by Nellie Bly with her landmark investigation of the Women's Lunatic Asylum of Blackwell's Island. A month spent in Allegheny Asylum revealed horrific mistreatment. Many of the asylum patients were seemingly misdiagnosed and institutionalized without a significant presence of mental health issues, in most cases for financial gain. Tarquin reported that patients were kept restrained for long periods of time in tight confines with other patients. They had breaks from this imprisonment only for treatment, meals, and sleep. Treatment was largely forcing patients to be immersed in ice-cold water. Basic needs were fulfilled at the lowest possible criteria, with no process for patients to request humane accommodations for things like vegetarian meal plans or additional blankets. Before she could commit her experiences to paper, she still had to be released from the asylum. Tarquin's editor had to file multiple times for her release from the institution into his care. Apart from putting the daring journalist through unnecessary misery, it also indicated that family members who were willing or able to care for relatives in the facility were left in the cold because they were unable to pay for fees associated with the release procedure. The intent of Tarquin's assignment was to remain in the facility for up to 10 days, but even with aggressively documented and funded attempts to release her, she remained in the facility for a month. All the while, any interested individual could pay the hospital for a guided tour of the facility. Ostensibly intended for doctors and health professionals, but not always the case, family members were not allowed to visit patients unless they could pay for this expensive and secretive lunatic tourism offering. And there was no guarantee that they would be able to see their family member without paying additional fees. Once the article was released, the revelation of the asylum being used by its management as a money-making scheme, and the abuses perpetrated in the name of healing, forced its closure. However, although the asylum closed down on March 17, 2061, the effect on the patient's welfare was marginal. Patients who did not qualify for a move to Watoga's facilities were discharged en masse with only a perfunctory attempt to contact their living relatives. Hospitals and doctors throughout the region were suddenly overwhelmed with all of the cases that they had quietly swept away over the years, and some just swept them away again. This caused a massive swell in the region's homeless population, resulting in a public health crisis swept under the rug by Watoga and the rich as a problem that did not affect them. No charges were pressed against Dr. Kessel and the rest of the hospital administration, even as the already high population of homeless itinerant workers in the region swelled. The stigmatized mental patients were further victimized by the endless media coverage about the threat that they posed to the region. The hospital would become a park, and its guards would help maintain the property by keeping trespassers away from the main building, calling animal control to remove aggressive animals, and to call the authorities to remove former patients seeking either help or a place to squat. The Great War saw the closed-down asylum gain a new lease at life for a few months, as a field trip organized by Clara Duran, the history teacher from Watoga High School, became the new tenants. The asylum was still fully furnished, with numerous facilities to ensure its self-sufficiency, including a water treatment plant, dairy, and of course, strong walls with intact windows providing shelter from the deadly Appalachian winter. By January, having survived the winter, The former Watogans were looking at a brighter future thanks to intense training. A dairy cow, Bertha, captured the previous year, and even some chickens. They were even starting to make forays into other survivor communities to trade the chem stock found at the asylum for essential supplies. Barring domestic issues, things were looking good, despite the building's structure not being as stable as once believed. Their luck ran out in March 2078. The fledgling collective was attacked by a group of raiders who killed the dairy cow and all the chickens for meat before taking off. The Allegheny survivors split into two groups in the aftermath. One half left for Monongah, unwilling to continue working with Watogans. The other half, uniting behind Duran, decided to make a break for Harper's Ferry and beyond to look for survivors there. With the passage of time and lack of maintenance, the property deteriorated, eventually becoming home to many feral ghouls. With its strong walls and underground power line to the Thunder Mountain power plant, secured in 2079, the property looked promising to the Appalachian Brotherhood of Steel. Seeking to establish the location as a stronghold for their expanding organization, a detachment was sent. Within the first week, the personnel managed to secure the first floor and clean up several rooms for their personal use. Among them was Squire Hannah de Silva, who came up with a new name for the facility, Fort Defiance. Eventually, they secured the entire property. It was around this time that, while they were on the roof trading war stories, they saw something that shocked them, a massive bat-like creature flying in from Watoga. They did not think anything was left alive there after its sabotage in 2077 by a single disgruntled Robco Industries worker from the Robco Research Center. When the monster flew towards them, they opened fire with their miniguns, scaring it away. This would be the Brotherhood's first encounter with the dreaded Scorch Beasts. With the facility now secure, Scribe Grant McNamara arrived to survey the property. He immediately checked the entire property and then began asking the personnel questions, such as how many breaches were in the walls, how many doors there were, as well as if there were any unsecured doors or windows. Eventually, he decided that they would have to abandon one wing of the building and the entire first floor, essentially throwing away all the plans the personnel had. His new plans included getting the elevator running and installing military-grade security that Squire Gary Weber found on a salvage run. All this was eventually completed. The last piece to be brought online was the elevator, which needed extra work on its hydraulics. However, this only happened after Squire Enrique Belmonte was stuck in there for 3 hours. By 2093, after the abandonment of Camp Venture and consolidation of all forces, barring Thunder Mountain, Fort Defiance served as headquarters for the established Appalachian branch of the Brotherhood of Steel. By January 2094, it continued to serve as the front line to contain the scorch beasts unleashed by the Enclave, as well as the subsequent Scorched Plague. The pressure of this, however, would lead to the collapse of the chapter. Having to resort to even harsher supply requisitions and seeing a continued loss of ground to a plague, the Brotherhood tried one last desperate measure to at least curtail the source of the plague, Operation Touchdown. After the operation, no scorch beasts were seen for a few weeks, leading the rest of the Brotherhood to assume the operation was a success, albeit one with a heavy cost, as the operation cost them the life of their main leader, Paladin Elizabeth Taggarty. This was not the case, and the scorch beasts returned in greater numbers. Fort Defiance fell on August 18, 2095, and Thunder Mountain fell the following day, with all members manning their posts until the end. For the next few years, the facility lay abandoned, barring ferals and other creatures which moved in. Though other factions attempted to investigate the Brotherhood's fall, all were unsuccessful in reaching the asylum, and it remained undisturbed until the emergence of Vault 76 dwellers in 2102. With the return of people to the region in 2103, the building became occupied by Jonah Ito, who is revisiting in remembrance of his sister Kaede, who died with the Brotherhood while defending the asylum.